Hello, Tanse, and welcome to APTN National News Weekend. I'm Daryl Stranger. Saskatchewan Justice wants a publication ban on the bail hearing, which could be a first step to freedom for two sisters in prison for 28 years for a murder they did not commit. The move caused their bail hearing to be pushed to the new year, and the women will spend another Christmas behind bars. APTN's Fraser Needham has more from Ottawa.
Odelia and Narissa Cusance have been in prison for almost 3 decades for the murder of Joseph Anthony Dolph, a crime their cousin pleaded guilty to in the 1990s. They're due for a bail hearing later this month, one that could potentially set them free. But Saskatchewan prosecutor Kelly Cape wants to prohibit media coverage of it. At a virtual press conference Monday morning, Senator Kim Pate says this is just plain wrong.
Then add to that, the provincial government is trying to seek a publication ban. That tells us that there is something, when it smells, when it, it looks like there's a problem, as has already been said by others, chances are there is something significantly wrong with how this case was handled.
Earlier this year, Federal Justice Minister David Lametti committed to a review of the sisters' convictions, saying a miscarriage of justice may likely have occurred. But Congress of Aboriginal Peoples Vice Chief Kim Bodin says the Saskatchewan government has been uncooperative at every turn.
Saskatchewan government has been non-compliant in any requests that we've made towards them, information that we wanted, anything like that.
Nicole Porter has worked with the Cusance sisters. She says the publication ban is part of an overall strategy by the Saskatchewan government to keep them behind bars.
We are seeking a remedy for these Indigenous women, yet at every corner we face resistance from the very government that falsely put them away in the first place.
Saskatchewan Justice responded to Porter in a statement. Court will decide the matter. Legal counsel for APTN News is also challenging the publication ban. The bail hearing will take place in Yorkton, Saskatchewan, November 24th and 25th. Fraser Needham, APTN National News, Ottawa.
APTN National News is following the ban application along. We will update you as the story develops. And on that note, APTN News broke the Cusance sisters' story 2 years ago and have been following it ever since. Our extensive reporting has led to widespread media coverage of the case. And for more on the publication ban being proposed, here's senior online reporter Kathleen Martens. Kathleen, thanks so much for joining us. It's always great having you on our newscast. So first off, what do we know about why the Crown wants a publication ban on this bail hearing?
Well, we don't know. I have been trying to find out on behalf of APTN for at least a month, trying to get what's called the Crown's factum. It's a public document. It lays out their view of the case so far, and it would tell me if they're going to oppose the Cusance sisters' bail next week and other facts. And it's a public document, but I've been stymied in trying to get it. And in the same time as that's been going on, I've been pushing for the release. Suddenly the Crown just last week said, you know what, we want not only a publication ban on covering the bail hearing, but we want all these records to be sealed.
So what would the effect of this ban be?
Well, it would be huge. I mean, we couldn't tell you, we couldn't report anything about the evidence that we hear at the bail hearing. So we can't hear why the Crown is opposing bail. We can't hear if they have a new witness or new evidence. We won't be able to report that. And it muzzles us inside an institution that is supposed to be public.
And Kathleen, why is it important that this bail hearing is made public?
Well, I mean, press freedom is a right under the Charter, and it is also one of the pillars of the justice system, that not only should justice be done, but justice should be seen to be done. So it is important that we are there to bear witness, to hear what's going on, and to report that to the public, especially APTN's audience, which has been following this case closely while we've been reporting it over the last several years.
And finally here, before we let you go, Kathleen, how is APTN National News fighting this proposed ban?
Well, we've right away alerted the judge that we are opposed. We have a media lawyer who is going to be in court next week when the Crown makes its application before the judge and the defense responds to that. Our lawyer will also have an opportunity to speak and make some of the arguments that I've already stated, that this is a public institution and that press freedom is a right, and also that this is an important case when it comes to how Indigenous peoples are treated in the Canadian justice system. And that is of utmost importance to our audience at APTN News.
It certainly is important. We'll have to leave it there, Kathleen, but we will certainly be keeping a close eye on this. Thanks so much for updating us on what's going on.
You're welcome, Daryl. Thank you.
It's not only Indigenous women and girls who go missing. A young Migmaq man from Listigouche, Quebec, disappeared in a forest a decade ago, and his grief-stricken mother is still looking for him. As Amelia Fournier explains, it's a story that still has no ending.
It doesn't look exactly the way you left it, because that's all these textbooks from school. That's all these movies that I don't even know where to put them. And everything I had packed.
It's been 10 years that Mandy Metallic has been looking for answers about what happened to her son, Chris Mackenzie Metallic, a then 20-year-old Migmaq from Listigouche, Quebec.
He can't just vanish in the middle of the woods and then there's no trace of anything.
Chris went missing after a party while he was in his third year at Mount Allison University in Sackville, New Brunswick, 4 hours away from Listigouche. His brother Spencer, who was also attending Mount Allison, called his mom on November 25, 2012, to tell her he couldn't find Chris. Tanner Isaac, Chris's other brother, was in grade 10 when he went missing.
I figured I'd wake up the next morning, they'd be like, oh, he found him, you know? It's just Chris being Chris, you know? He needed some time alone.
But when his brother didn't reappear, Tanner's world was shattered.
That's the hard part, is seeing everybody just fall apart, because we're so lost and we don't know what to do anymore.
Chris's path was traced by the RCMP into nearby woods, but ultimately all roads led to nowhere.
You can tell he was getting lost. He was going back and forth, back and forth.
His prints eventually led to the Tantramar River, where tracking dogs lost his scent. The river was later searched by divers.
Some places are really hard to go through. Like this is where, that's the size of the river they think he fell in and got washed out.
Mandy has combed over the road where footprints presumed to belong to Chris were identified.
It's all I'm focused on. I don't do anything else. When I'm home, I'm planning on what to do next, and then when we're there, we're searching. And
Chris touched the lives of many and was an avid basketball player.
That's the newspaper clipping when they won the gold medal. That was his last game.
Both Mandy and Tanner said they felt the RCMP put in their best efforts to find Chris.
The RCMP are really helpful, and it's surprising because, you know, just being like Indigenous, you feel a little hesitant with getting help from them, but they've helped out so much with getting like helicopters and searches and divers and everything.
Desperate to find her son, Mandy conducted innumerable searches. She spent tens of thousands of dollars on trips to Sackville, searching with dogs, divers, drones, and even helicopters.
Giving up's not an option. And you still gotta live. I got other kids, and we live here. It's so far away.
The community rallied for Chris. Listigouche residents drove up to Sackville to help search, raise funds, and held vigils for Chris.
The community support was overwhelming in a good way because, you know, Chris knew a lot of people and he was friends with so many people and he never had bad blood with anybody. So to see all of his friends and just community members in general come out and help us was amazing, you know.
Even now, the community participated in Mandy's fundraiser to fund new billboards on the 10-year anniversary.
I painted this.
Despite previous positive encounters with the RCMP, Mandy Metallic says she hasn't heard from the RCMP in months. But that won't stop her from searching for closure on the well-trodden road in Sackville.
I feel like I need to keep his disappearance out there for so he's not forgotten.
If you have any information regarding Chris Metallic's disappearance, call Crime Stoppers at 1-800-222-8477 or TIPS. Emilia Fournier, APTN National News, Listigouche, Quebec.
We have to step aside for a short break, but still to come, this week marked 137 years since Canada executed Louis Riel. Welcome back. North Baffin Island residents have been waiting patiently for a final decision on the proposed expansion of the Mary River iron ore mine. Northern Affairs Minister Dan Vandal made the announcement this week. Our Kent Driscoll joins us from Iqaluit. Kent, are they sticking with the status quo?
Yes, we do. The Department of Northern Affairs has sided with the Nunavut Impact Review Board and decided to not allow Phase 2 expansion of the Mary River iron ore mine. Now, here's part of what Northern Affairs Minister Dan Vandal wrote to the Nunavut Impact Review Board. Quote, "The other responsible ministers and I are sensitive to the economic significance of both the ongoing Mary River mine operations and the Phase 2 proposal to the North Baffin region, and Nunavummiut more generally. However, we have taken particular note of the conclusions of the board, the designated Inuit organizations, and the hunters and trappers organizations, given their specific roles outlined in the Nunavut Agreement, who have expressed a lack of confidence that Phase 2, as currently conceived, can proceed without unacceptable impacts." Now, the decision was published late this afternoon. Vandal's office had already received a 90-day extension to review the over 400-page decision. And this process, it's been underway since 2014. Now, earlier, the Nunavut Impact Review Board denied the mine permission to double production, including turning down a proposal that would have seen a railway installed to make the ore easier to get to ships. A reaction has been mixed in the communities most affected, Pond Inlet and Arctic Bay. And many of the residents see the benefit of having jobs in their communities, while others worry that the mine is hurting the wildlife. Now, the Mary River iron ore mine, it's located in between Pond Inlet and Arctic Bay, Nunavut. They were seeking to double their production, and there are currently 1,100 jobs at that site. Around 300 of them are held by Inuit. We'll be following the reaction as it rolls out. Back to you in Winnipeg.
This week marked 137 years since Canada executed Louis Riel. In Ottawa, Métis politicians took time to talk about his legacy and contributions to the Métis Nation and Canada. APTN's Fraser Needham has the story.
Dan Vandal is the Minister of Northern Affairs. He says Riel's impact on Canadian history cannot be underestimated. But Vandal is also the Liberal Member of Parliament for a riding in Winnipeg with a strong connection to Riel.
I consider him a father of Confederation, Manitoba's first premier. I'm honored that Riel was born in the constituency, the riding that I represent, St. Boniface St. Vital, and I'm equally honored that he rests there. His tomb is in St. Boniface Cemetery, and was elected 3 times as a member of Parliament, but was never allowed to take his seat in the House of Commons.
Edmonton NDP MP Blake Desjardins says the accomplishments of Riel and Métis people as a whole have largely gone unrecognized in Canada, but things are changing.
I really think there's been a significant change. Métis people in Canada have a really unique history, one that has been almost excluded from the history books for generations. A lot of folks wouldn't know, but Métis people have been here a very long time. We have one of the oldest patriotic flags in North America, and Métis people have contributed not just to the founding of Canada and the Prairie Provinces, but even before then. We were the folks who were ushering in a whole era of fur trade, of commerce.
Unfortunately, Riel's grave marker in the St. Boniface Cathedral Cemetery was vandalized last month, and Vandal had this to say about the incident.
No, that it was a horrible act, unbelievably insensitive, and I hope they find the person who did it and he receives his just punishment, he or she.
Winnipeg police are investigating it as a hate crime and identified this male pictured here as a suspect. Anyone with information is asked to call Winnipeg's Major Crimes Unit at 204-986-6219. Fraser Needham, APTN National News, Ottawa.
APTN News reported Alberta's new Premier, Danielle Smith, has made several claims over the years that she has Cherokee ancestry. Our reporter Danielle Pardy dug into those claims and enlisted the help of a few genealogists. Danielle joined us earlier this week. Danielle, thanks for joining us here. Smith's statements about her ancestry have been around for years. What was it that made you interested in looking into these claims now?
Yeah, most recently there was a tweet that Danielle Smith sent out about firing a phone bank contractor. And there she talks about how she's somebody with Indigenous ancestry. And I actually hadn't heard that before. So I started looking around thinking, had she claimed that before? And I found out a few other instances on her radio show, as well as in the Alberta legislature, where she talks about having a great grandmother who was Cherokee. So from there I just started digging and worked with some genealogists to put together the story.
So in the story you talk about the Cherokee Nation being very well documented. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I mean, due to the Trail of Tears and the Dawes Rolls, which is the rolls of the so-called 5 civilized tribes in the U.S., they were really they documented, similar to the Indian Act, members who belong to a part of one of the nations, and they would exist on these rolls known as the Dawes Rolls. So anybody claiming to be Cherokee would need to point to an ancestor that is on these rolls.
Okay, and when you were writing the story, what did the genealogist have to say about the fact that there are so many unsupported claims about Cherokee identity?
Yeah, one of my first questions to her was not just specific to Danielle Smith, but in general, it seems like we keep hearing these stories about people claiming Cherokee ancestry. Elizabeth Warren is another famous example, but there are others. And I asked her, what is going on with that? Why are there so many claims? She said in the last U.S. Census, there were more people claiming to be Cherokee than were actually in the Cherokee Nation itself. There's a lot of reasons for that. Some people associate it with so-called white guilt, and the idea that people are looking to distance themselves from these horrifying stories that they hear, be it in Canada with residential schools or in the US with the Trail of Tears, or they also had industrial schools there too. So it could be that. It could be just a family lore, the sort of story people talk about and then never really look into. There's a few factors, but whatever it is, it's very common.
That's super interesting, what you just said there about some of those claims. What has the response been so far to the story?
Pretty big response so far, Daryl. Lots of activity online. I would say it's very mixed. Whenever we're talking about stories, and I'm not saying that this is a pretendian story. This is somebody claiming that they had Cherokee ancestry, and that's not quite the same thing as, say, taking a job at a university and claiming to have Indigenous ancestry. We're dealing with something a little bit different, but she has used it in the past during the 2012 Lake of Fire incident, where her party came under scrutiny for some anti-LGBTQ remarks. That's when she started to talk about being Cherokee and having, her own family story of her great grandmother being moved because of the Trail of Tears. So I think it's important to investigate these claims as they come up, and that's the general feedback I'm getting right now.
Well, we're going to have to leave it there, Danielle, but we certainly appreciate you coming on and updating us on this important story. So thank you, Migmaq, for updating us.
Thanks, Daryl.
Time to step aside one final time, but still ahead, one of the first people to set up camp on the banks of the Cannonball River in Standing Rock has passed away. Welcome back. A new group is partnering with Winnipeg cab companies to ensure safe transportation for Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people. The first of its kind project will see Indigenous women come together to address years of widespread concern with taxis in Winnipeg. They have partnered with 2 Winnipeg cab companies, Unicity and Duffy's, as well as the City of Winnipeg department that oversees the industry. Shanine Robinson-Desjarlis says they hope to include rideshare companies and provide a safe space to file concerns.
One of our committee members said, I don't even allow my daughter to take cabs in this city. And that really affected some of our new friends in the cab company. And they realized, okay, there's something we got to do here. We need to make an action plan right now. So that's what we're committed to today, moving forward with all of the details of who's coming on board with the city, the province, whoever. That has to be worked out. But what we're saying today as a committee is that we won't be taking no for an answer, that this is something that's urgent and needed and far overdue.
A new display at the Canadian Museum of History in Ottawa highlights the work of water rights activist Autumn Pelletier. In 2018, she addressed the United Nations General Assembly about contaminated water on First Nations, and she wore a distinct embroidered dress. That dress is now on display at the Museum of Canadian History in Gatineau, Quebec. The 18-year-old was recently nominated for the Children's Peace Prize. She was one of 3 finalists and the first from Canada to make it to the final stage. A larger display of more of Pelletier's artifacts will be prepared for the new year. James Trepanier is one of the museum's curators.
I'm a historian of childhood, so I'm always fascinated by young people and how they make a difference in the world. Autumn is a prime example of that. I think her advocacy, both within Canada and internationally, makes her a significant figure in Canada, particularly tied to the notion that Indigenous populations across Canada are some of the youngest in the country. And so Indigenous young people are really leading the way on a number of important social movement fronts.
One of the first people to set up camp on the banks of the Cannonball River in Standing Rock has passed away. Joy Braun was the founder of the Oceti-Shikoan camp at Standing Rock. Hers was one of the first lodges to go up and last to come down.
Braun set up camp in Standing Rock in April 2016, answering the call of LaDonna Brave Bull Allard, who passed away last year, to protest the Dakota Access Pipeline. The pipeline was set to cross the Missouri River in Standing Rock, North Dakota. The camp swelled to more than 10,000 people at one point, bringing together Indigenous peoples, non-Indigenous people, celebrities, and veterans from around the globe. Braun was a member of the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe and a water protector with the Indigenous Environmental Network. She passed away on Sunday at her home at the age of 53. 5 years ago today, we were with her near her home in Eagle Butte, South Dakota, shooting an episode of Face to Face. Here's some of what she had to say about her fight against pipelines in the Dakotas and the treatment water protectors received at the hands of law enforcement and hired security contractors.
They called me a jihadist. Me. I'm the one that said no guns. I'm the one that says take your camp knife and get it back to camp. Stay in prayer. I'm not a jihadist. All I want is water, clean water. I just want the opportunity for my grandchildren to drink clean water and not grow up drinking the contaminated water that I had to drink my whole life.
All right, that's all we have for you on this edition of APTN National News Weekend. For more news, you can visit our website at aptnnews.ca. I'm Daryl Stranger. Thank you for joining us. Migmaq, and have a great weekend.